And a very good evening to you, and welcome once again to the Green Zone updates from Jerusalem. I'm Eugene Doyle, and wherever you're watching from, thank you for joining us this evening. Every day in Ireland, we hear politicians, commentators, journalists, and campaigners discussing Israel and the wider Middle East. We hear about war, occupation, genocide, Gaza, settlements, international law, human rights. But tonight, we're stepping back from the daily headlines to ask a much bigger question. How has Ireland come to see Israel the way it does? Is our understanding complete? Are there important historical facts and regional realities that receive little attention? And why does Ireland appear to have one of the strongest political positions against Israel in Europe? My guest this evening has spent years researching those very questions. Audrey Griffin's book, Hey Ireland, Israel is on the Line, is both a personal journey and a challenge to Irish readers, drawing on her time living in Jerusalem, traveling throughout Israel and the wider Middle East, and years of historical research. Audrey argues that many Irish people have inherited a narrative that tells only part of the story. Whether you ultimately agree with her conclusions or not, her book raises important questions about history, media, politics, religion, and the future of the Middle East. I'm also joined, as usual, live from Jerusalem by fellow Irishman, political analyst, and co-producer of The Green Zone, Marco Alexander. And who better is placed to authenticate the findings in this book? Tonight, we'll explore those questions in depth. Audrey and Marco, you are most welcome to the Green Zone, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thanks, Eugene.
Now, okay, just for our listeners out there, will I just turn off that for a second? 1 second there. For our listeners out there, where are we gone here? Banners. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm asking my listeners to do three things, just three simple things. One is to subscribe to the program, and because that helps us to bring you even more better content as time goes on. I'm asking you to drop a comment in the chat. Anything you hear tonight and you want to comment on it, please send us a message and we will display it and we'll comment on it if it requires a comment. And I'd also ask you to share this podcast with family, friends, in your own people, and among your own people. And there we go. Now, so guys, you're very welcome. Marco, as we always do at the very start, we go to just kind of some updates from Jerusalem this week. So we now know that the Knesset elections are going to be on the 27th of October. I think that's set in stone more or less at this stage.
Yes.
Now, the Netanyahu's government has gone and is rushing through various legislations that are very important to the party, and some stuff that he promised he would do when he came into government.
Mm-hmm.
One of those is the reducing the power of the Attorney General. I'm assuming that you welcome that legislation.
Yes, that was a very necessary step. It's very much in line with the same attitude that informs judicial reforms to curtail the power of unelected officials who, during the course of this present government and indeed before, were interfering to a great extent with the legislative process and the will of the people. So from my point of view, and I think from the point of view of any reasonable person, this is a very welcome aspect of this law. It'll give government minister will now have a broader authority to obtain also independent legal representation instead of relying solely on the Attorney General's office, and they will also have greater power over the appointment of the Attorney General. This Attorney General, of course, has distinguished herself by being particularly antagonistic towards the present government. It is abundantly clear that she is politically biased, and she's very much aligned with the Supreme Court and other elements within the deep state.
Because it's always struck me, Marco, and I've said this to you before about the Attorney General in Israel. I mean, to be also the Director of Public Prosecutions, if you like, as well. I mean, in Ireland, first of all, the Attorney General is a member of the government, appointed by the government of the day, is a member of government, but and advises the government, but the government don't have to take the advice of the Attorney General. But sometimes they would be wise to do it, obviously.
Indeed.
But I always saw a conflict of interest there, that a person could be a Director of Public Prosecutions and be a member of the present government as well, which is to me sounded bizarre. But anyway,
here there's been an overstretch, of course, which is abundantly clear. To a great extent, she arrogated powers to herself which don't belong to her, and indeed, as the Supreme Court does as well, because in reality, they don't have the authority to do what they are currently doing, and that is obstructing the government and being selective and interpreting the law in a way which is harmful to the state of Israel. They have a long track record, unfortunately, of handing down judgments which are politically biased.
And then just in relation to, there's obviously various polls, and will be many of them before election day, but some of the polls are saying at the moment that Netanyahu is suffering as a result of rushing through this legislation. I assume you would agree that that's probably a temporary blip, and people will get over themselves.
Look, time will ultimately tell. You know where I stand on this, of course. I think we're going into a very interesting period. I think it will be a transitional period whereby, if hopefully Benjamin Netanyahu is re-elected, he will facilitate a period of transition. So I do hope he will get re-elected. The polls are the polls. The polls have consistently diminished his popularity, but reality very often has revealed itself to be a little bit different.
Okay, and before we get into the real meat of this story, we always bring, as we said a couple of weeks ago, we always bring you just one single thing, whether it's a video or some reality, to show the Irish people that not all is what you're hearing back in Ireland. And I have a piece here, it's a single shot, but they say a picture paints 1,000 words, and certainly this one does. As it says there, in 2020, Hamas turns water pipes into rockets thanks to the EU's 100 million euros, right? That's in 2020. 6 years later, the EU sends 900 million to restore the same infrastructure. I mean, guys, you couldn't write this, could you?
If one didn't know what the EU represented, one wouldn't believe it. But at least they're being consistent. We can't fault them for that. There is a certain consistency.
Now, Audrey, you've been patiently waiting there, and first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to have you, and delighted to see you again, and hear you again, because it's a couple of years since we met and since we talked. But I'm really delighted that you've come on this evening, because your book is absolutely fascinating, and just to let readers know there, our viewers know there, that in the chat there is links to Audrey's book on Amazon and also on her own website. So their links are in there on thing, if anyone wants to buy it, because it is really a good read, and it's really down to earth stuff. There's no highfalutin stuff in this. This is really just really good stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. So much so that I read it twice. Now, Audrey, first of all, tell us about your journey. I want our viewers to know who Audrey Griffin is. So tell us your journey and how you ended up being involved in the missions.
Wow. Okay. So I suppose I became an Irish teacher at some point in my young life, and I was teaching for a few years. I was teaching religion, actually, and Irish. and a bit of drama too thrown in, you know. So anyway, I came to a point where I was working in this school for 3 years. I had a permanent job. It was a tough school in some ways. It was great in many ways. There were great perks, but it was a boarding school, and I was working 6 days a week, and there were extra burdens and expectations, you know, in this fee-paying school. So by the time I reached my 3rd year, I knew, you know, this would be my final year in that particular school. And so wonderful. I handed in my resignation before, you know, the end of the year. And then I had a blank canvas in front of me, because I just decided that as a secondary school teacher, I had 3 months anyway. I had enough time. I was an Irish and religion teacher, which was a great combination for getting jobs. They're always crying out for Irish and religion teachers. So I knew I would have no problem getting a job somewhere. So I just relaxed, and really I spent the summer seeking the Lord about what to do with my life. And so I was reading really interesting books, like If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat by John Ortberg, which was quite inspirational for me, and, you know, eventually led me along the path of missions, really, along with another wonderful book by Brother Yun, The Heavenly Man. And this was about his life as, you know, a Chinese guy who at the age of 16, he was from a rural village, had never heard of Jesus, and had a vision of Jesus, and anyway, basically was just radically converted, and went to prison for his faith, really suffered for his faith, miraculously got out of prison one time. The doors opened and the Lord just made a way for him to get out. So it was really inspirational, and it renewed a heart for missions in me that had been there from when I was actually about 13. So it just stirred something up in me again. And anyway, but I wasn't really thinking that necessarily. I was just, I suppose, just resting and enjoying the time off, and enjoying getting to know my God better. So by reading scriptures, and, you know.
And just before you go on there, there's 2 remarkable things straight away that I'm learning about you straight away. First of all, that you would give up a pensionable job as a secondary school teacher, because you know, June, July, and August, very important for secondary school teachers, and whatever. And then you were also you were born in Dublin, and you were born into the Catholic Church, isn't that right?
I was, yes.
But you didn't stay there. She didn't.
No, I got born again.
Yeah, go on.
About the age of 18. And basically, just to explain that to any viewers who don't know what that's about. So in the Gospel of John in the New Testament, so the Nicodemus is actually a Pharisee who comes to ask Jesus a question, and he comes to his house at night because he doesn't want to be seen. So he's doing this surreptitiously. And anyway, the Lord just basically tells him, Jesus speaks to him and says, you know, unless you are born of the Spirit, you know, you must be born again. And he said, how can I be born again? Can I go back into my mother's womb? And, you know, so he knew that was an impossibility. So what it means to be born again, right? So Jesus didn't say, no, you have to go back into your mother's womb. None of us could do that, right? So what it means is that your spirit becomes born again, regenerated, so that the disconnect that happened at the fall in Genesis, this disconnect between us and God, where we decided, you know what, maybe we'll do it our way. Maybe we're good enough to do it our way. We don't necessarily need, you know. So pride came in, sin came in, and where was I going now? I hope I don't go off on a little tangent.
Yeah. But then,
so your spirit gets born again, but not your, like, obviously we age, unfortunately, you know. We've got a soul as well that is not immediately born again. The spirit part of us is, that's reconnected with God, that's renewed, that's restored. But the soul is like the emotions, our mind, our will. All of that needs to be renewed. And that's where the Bible comes in. That's where we renew our minds in the Word of God. And so So that's what happened at 18. And I started to read the Bible and I couldn't stop. I had this ferocious appetite for the Bible. And all of a sudden as well, I was no longer cursing. So this is a testimony that actually not many people know about me. But as a teenager, and maybe my parents don't even know this, but as a teenager, I had a fierce, filthy mouth on me. I used to curse left, right, and center. But when I got born again, I noticed after a little while, I wasn't doing that anymore. That was just gone. And the desire then to just want to please God and live for God was just, just kept growing. And by the time I left that school, which was only about just a few years later, really, that summer then I was, seeking the Lord about what to do with my life. And, by the 2nd of August, Lebanon kept on coming up. Everywhere I turned. I don't know. It was, why?
Why?
It was in the Bible, right? So I was reading about, Solomon bringing the cedar from Lebanon for the temple. Everywhere I turned, I was wearing this tank top that I had at the time, this really cool tank top. I was, delighted with it. It was a mango top. And it had the names of all these countries on it. And I looked in the mirror one day and all I could see was Lebanon. It was just Lebanon. And they had all the names of all the different countries, and there were other signs like that. And so I just then was asking the Lord for confirmation. Are you telling me to go to Lebanon? And he kept giving me confirmations in his mercy and grace and kindness. And so by October, so that was the 2nd of August, by October, I was in Lebanon and I was there on my first little mission, there in an orphanage for a few months and just absolutely loving it, just.
And who did you end up going to Lebanon? Were you with an organization or
yes? Well, I suppose I looked up organizations and it just seemed right to go with Kids Alive, which were an organization that had a home based in the hills just above Beirut. So it was just a really beautiful place to be and a fabulous view of the Mediterranean Sea and of the smog over Beirut below. I'll never forget the yellow smog over Beirut. But but it was just such an amazing experience. So that's how I first got to Lebanon. And then I thought, this is it. I want missions for the rest of my life.
And what year did you go to? What year did you end up in Lebanon?
So that was 2003.
Oh, 2003. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would have served in Lebanon myself as part of the Defense Forces back in the 80s. But tell me this: what did you? We're going to come to you coming to Israel. We're going to find out how you got there in a minute. But what did you think of Lebanon when you were there?
I loved it. We were in an orphanage. It was a Christian-run orphanage, so there were born-again Christians running it, but there were lots of Muslim children in it. And some of these parents actually were still alive, but they couldn't afford to actually raise some of their kids. They had large families, so they sent their children to this orphanage. And so actually I befriended a guy who was a Muslim, came very much from a Muslim background, would even have been raised to be, they were preparing him for Hezbollah, to tell you the truth, for terrorism, believe it or not. And he got born again himself and we became great friends. And, I haven't been in touch with him for a while, but we maintained that friendship for quite a while,
Okay.
Okay.
So now you're in Lebanon. You're in an orphanage of young children, both Christian and Muslim. Then and before you go to Lebanon now, before we go to Israel, tell me honestly, what was your thoughts about Israel before you ever went there? What would you have thought, even from 18 on? What would you have thought of Israel?
Well, if I could just maybe say, that actually after that time really in Lebanon, I actually wondered if the Lord was calling me to the Arabs of the Middle East. Okay. So just to say how much I loved it, I loved the culture, I loved the people that I knew there, although I did begin to see, and over time, the element of, like say, for example, sorry, if I can go back to this, if it's okay, but on New Year's Eve.
Go wherever you want to go, Audrey.
Okay, thank you. But on New Year's Eve, for example, like I was just absolutely amazed that we were sitting, as I say, in the hills overlooking Beirut. And on New Year's Eve, you heard all these shots. You heard these, I'm going to call them shots. And then there were these red things shooting up into the sky. And I'm asking, what are these? And people were shooting their guns up into the sky on New Year's Eve. So anyway, it was just a very different experience. But I did, I heard some stuff and I got to see that. But at the same time, my heart was very much for the Arabs and the Arab world. Now, before Israel, I was actually quite ignorant. I didn't know that much. I didn't have preconceived ideas about Israel.
Okay.
So from the age of 18, you're saying, what were I suppose, looking at the Bible, I had no issues with Israel. I had no issues with the people of Israel. I didn't know much about what was going on in Israel. Okay. But I didn't have, and I always had sympathy for, the perpetual persecution of the Jewish people throughout the centuries. That was, anything I knew of it, like obviously the Holocaust and anything else I knew of it, I thought it was absolutely horrific. So I wasn't actually biased towards Israel. I'd say if anything, I may have been predisposed to the Arabs because of my beautiful experience in Lebanon.
Okay. And I have to say, that was my experience in Lebanon as well, that there is some very beautiful people in Lebanon. Absolutely blown away by some of the people that I met. But I see exactly where you're coming from, the other dark element of it as well. So you're in Lebanon. What happened then?
So they asked me if I'd like to stay. I prayed and I got a no from the Lord. So it was like, well, okay, God obviously has another plan. So off I went back home to Ireland. Shortly after, I went on a short mission to Zambia. And anyway, back to Ireland again. I started doing some kind of voluntary work. And then I ended up getting a little bit of a job. So I was working with a Christian job club. And before that, I was working with the Salvation Army, actually, because I was kind of just volunteering, helping out with the homeless. And then I ended up getting a job with them. So that was all going on. And then the Lord spoke to me about Israel out of the blue. 2 years later, exactly, he called me to Israel in October again of 2005 this time. So,
and what do you believe he wanted you to do in Israel? Why do you think he wanted you to go there?
Well, I very much sought him beforehand. I was looking for those clues because I just, you could be doing anything. But he was speaking to me about college. And when I prayed about it, I was like, college, am I hearing you right, God? Because I've been to college. I've studied theology. Now, it was Catholic theology, mind you, at the time.
Yeah.
But, but because when I studied theology, when I filled in my CAO form, actually, to do theology in Maynooth, I wasn't yet born again. So if I had been born again, I wouldn't have chosen to go that route. But look, I learned a lot and then Israel, where were we? You'll have to remind me. Sorry.
No, I was asking you. I was asking you why do you think the Lord wanted you to go to Israel? So you said about college. Yeah. So go on from the college. To
go to college, and I was really surprised by this. He kept confirming it that it was college. So I found Israel College of the Bible, and that was based in Jerusalem at the time. It's no longer based in Jerusalem. It's out in Netanya. And it's actually, the name has been changed now. It's One for Israel is the group that actually run that, Erez Soref, who does an amazing job. I get to see it all online. But so I went to college in Jerusalem back in 2005, and that was my journey. That was the beginning of my journey. But I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know what God wanted from me. Other students, some of them were doing a degree. I decided, well, I'll do the Year in Israel program because I'm not really sure, I'm not really sure how long the Lord wants me here. So that wasn't clear to me. So I said, okay, I'll just do a Year in Israel program. And so that first time I was there 10 months. And just living in Jerusalem, in the heart of the modern city, loving it. Absolutely loving it. Yeah.
Now, okay, so you're now in Israel, and what were your thoughts of Israel when being there? Now, I know from reading the Bible that would certainly be one. It would be certainly a draw to go to Jerusalem. Mind you, I'll come back to you later about the Bible. It's very hard to read. I did read it myself, but found it very difficult. But just what did you think of Israel when you were there? What was your experience of it?
My experience, as I say, coming from a non-biased, I was very neutral, right? My experience was absolutely wonderful. I got to see Arabs and Jewish people and Druze and international people interacting as normal, as you'd expect them to do in any other city, and going about their business. And I was always out on the streets. I don't know what it was about Jerusalem. I'm a bit of a home bird, but in Jerusalem, I'm out on the streets all the time. I want to go places. I want to be there. And, it was the new me. But every day after college, I would be walking up King George Street down to the market, the Jewish market.
Machane Yehuda.
Yes,
that's the
right.
one.
Yes. And down to the old city. There was a soup kitchen down there. There was a prayer room down the other side. But I was out and about the whole time. So I got to witness. I was, always out among the people. And I have to say, when I'd hear these crazy notions about apartheid in Israel, I was like just shocked. Like I didn't know what they were talking about, It just was not my experience. And I was there for long enough to have seen it, in the old city, now the one thing I did find different was that when you went to restaurants and maybe certain shops, there was a security guard outside at the time, and they had to check your bag to make sure you didn't have a weapon or there wasn't a bomb in your bag, because unfortunately, when I arrived there, this was just after the Second Intifada. I mean, really just after. This was 2005, and it was straight after the Gaza disengagement, which happened in the August of that year. So anyway,
so tensions were high.
And tensions were high in that regard. But I didn't mind. I thought, well, it makes perfect sense. If they're concerned that their shop is going to be blown up, if people are going to be harmed, well, of course, check my bag. I've no problem. That makes perfect sense to me. As it should do. They had to do that for security reasons. So I totally got that. I had no issues with it, but it was just the only unusual thing, really. If anything as well, when going down to I felt the Jewish market was very different to the Arab market. That was my experience. Okay. Now, can I just say before I mentioned that, actually, that when I arrived in Jerusalem, I arrived 2 weeks before college because I wanted to do a little recce on the land. I wanted to check it out and go in like the spies. And
you wanted to spy the land like Yoshua and Caleb ben Yefuneh.
I did. So, but the very
and you
first
came back with a favorable report.
I did. A very favorable one, thank God.
Like Caleb and Yoshua.
But from my first restaurant or cafe that I went into, as soon as I reached Jerusalem, I found this Lebanese restaurant inside the walls of the old city. And I was absolutely delighted. So I got my bags down into the hostel. And the first thing I did was get up there and go in and have a meal in this Lebanese restaurant. And it was a very different experience to what I'd had when I was living in Lebanon.
In what way?
My experience there was I felt very uncomfortable. There were 2 men working in the restaurant. I would have been in my late 20s. There were 2 men working in it, and they were asking me all these questions. I went in friendly and innocent, not really realizing, I know I was in Lebanon and I was, And, but I soon found out there was just something just creepy about the place, to be honest. I didn't like the questions they were asking me. I didn't like the fact that they wanted me to meet somebody around the corner. And I thought, that's it. I'm out of here. Once I had my meal, I never went back there again. Never touched the place again. So that was and then also in the Arab market, I have to say again, I'm just saying from my experience, it was very different to the Jewish market.
In what way?
Loved going to the Jewish market. The colors, the aromas, oh my goodness. But people just got on with their own business. And, And it just absolutely was wonderful. And going on Shabbat when there was the madness on Sabbath of everybody preparing for Sabbath before, I just loved it. But when I go down to the Arab markets, I didn't feel comfortable. I found them I just didn't feel comfortable with the men. And there were men really in the shops down in the Arab market. You didn't have women, selling the goods. It was the men, but there was just something about them that I was uneasy about. I just didn't. That's my experience.
Okay, and Marco, just go to you for a second. Have you been in the Arab markets?
I go there every day as a tour guide. I'm in the Arab market. It's the old
Oh.
city, so I do all the markets, Machane Yehuda, and all the Arab Jewish Christian quarters. That's par for the course. Yeah, I'm there all the time. Yeah, but it resonates. What Audrey says does resonate, because it's much more easygoing. The Machane, it's a much more joyful experience. Not to detract from the other experience, but certainly it's much more colorful and much more joyful. And there's, I suppose, to use that 60s expression, there's a nicer vibe. Let's say.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it felt.
Say that again.
I think.
Are we back on?
You're back on, Audrey. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Are we back on?
Yes, you are.
Back. Yeah. You're frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay. I have to say, I didn't feel as safe. I just didn't feel as safe down there, And so to be honest, after a short while, I just started going only to the Jewish market because that's where I felt safe. But I did go down into the old city, and loved that. But I was careful about where I went, especially when I was alone. And did you felt I had to be.
Did you feel safe all the time in Lebanon?
Well, yes, I actually did. Now, I may have been just very naive as well because I really didn't know much about. In fact, had I even heard of Hezbollah before I went to Lebanon? I don't think I'd even heard of them. So I remember I used to go on the bus and go shopping by myself and come back with my goods and, and I didn't even think about it really. So, but I don't know, I just felt a very kind of uncomfortable atmosphere for me, I have to say, in among some of the Arabs, in the old city. And yet there were some lovely Arabs in the modern city that were working there and they were fine, but there was just
certainly
there was some kind of atmosphere. It was like, I don't know, we experienced it again a couple of years ago when my husband and I were there. There was just not a sense of comfortability. Just feel like you kind of want to get out of here and move on,
Okay, so you spent 10 months altogether in Israel at that time? Was
that
right?
First time, yes.
And then, what happened after that? Did you go back to Ireland?
I went back to Ireland for 2 weeks and then off on mission to Hawaii for 3 months, then down to Mexico for a month, then back to Hawaii for a month, down to Mexico for 3 months, then back to Israel, then back to Israel.
Okay, and then for 3 months. Okay, so
that was the following summer then. Yeah.
Now, then Audrey, what we'll talk about the title of the book and all that in a moment, but what led you to write the book? How did that all come about?
Well, I can tell you I hadn't a clue that was coming back in 2005 when I first came to Israel, when I first went there. And, and even following that for the first number of years after that, what happened was I was away in Siberia on mission back in 2011. And I was working with Operation Exodus, which is an organization that helps Jewish people return to Israel. So my heart was very much for the Jewish people at this stage. And my heart had been for the nations, but something changed then, and it really then began to focus in very much on Israel. And that was actually the Lord's will. I could go into the details, but maybe I shouldn't bore you. But in Siberia, it was there that actually, I was there only 2 weeks, and we were on our first kind of mission, let's say, on a 2-day journey to get to a town out in the middle of nowhere where they'd no running water, no electricity. It was really quite an experience. But I had a lot of time to think and pray. And on the way, and when we were chatting, I had basically a team leader there was myself and then my translator. And we moved around to different places. And on this first little mission that we were on there, on the bus, the first, whatever, in those 2 days, I began to just have a lovely time with the Lord, just a lovely connection, a lovely kind of prayer time. And all of a sudden he showed me the map of Ireland, and he showed me Ireland on fire in a good sense. Okay, so like revival, like in Ireland, and somebody had also given me a prophetic word before that, that of the map of Ireland before I ever left, and anyway, that seemed to kind of confirm it as well. But it wasn't until I was in the last few weeks really of my time in Siberia, so I was there for 3 months, and in my last few weeks that I was there, the team leader was sick. I had a week off. So I was reading a lot of books actually about Israel, and I ended up getting lots of little copybooks and writing lots of notes. And I ended up this ended up going into my book later on, but I hadn't realized at the time. But during a prayer time that week, the Lord showed me to write a book for the people of Ireland. And he gave me the title, Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line. And I just said, oh my goodness, what a dramatic title. So Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line, not the subtitle, only the title.
Okay.
And I just knew I was to go home and write a book for the people of Ireland, and he was calling me to Ireland. So
now,
yeah.
When I look at that title, Hey Ireland, Israel's on the Line, I know this wasn't your intention of it, but that title says another thing to me. It says to me, Hey Ireland, Israel's on the line. That would confirm to me that there was a very different attitude towards Israel back before our time. I'm going to give you a rest for a minute, Audrey, and just Marco. Do you see what I'm seeing in that title there? That maybe at one point there was a different attitude towards Israel. That's very in those few words there on the title of that book. Say it.
Well, certainly when you and I were growing up, Eugene, there was a much more balanced view. I think we can safely say that. The poison of Palestinism hadn't quite seeped in at all levels. So certainly Ireland was a very different country in that sense. Of course, people also in Ireland knew their Bible. And I say this as a Jew, of course. People were familiar with the protagonists in the Bible. Of course, nobody ever dressed up Jesus in a keffiyeh, when there were never nativity scenes which were conditioned by Palestinism and with this fictitious narrative. Nobody would have even dreamed of that. I mean, I was the only Jew in a Catholic school, and certainly I remember people preparing nativity scenes. Okay, and Audrey, you were all too familiar with that. There's never any notion of Jesus being anything other but Jewish. Jesus, of course, and his family, of course. So something very strange has happened in Ireland, and I think it might be the case, Audrey, even to write a book that Ireland is on the line now, because I fear for Ireland by going down this path. It's falling into a trap whereby its own Christian identity is being compromised. And of course, when I say compromised, it's not something that's just simply a passive process. There is agency to it. We see people and we see groups that are actively trying to change the whole habitat, the natural habitat of the Irish people, and to confuse them with terms, because this is what's happening. The whole notion of language, and we explored it last week as well. It's part of a similar process where we see a great process of disorientation and alienation from what the Irish people understood to be reality.
Just before we go back to Audrey, just want to say good evening to Otta, and he says, Eugene and Marco, nice to see you again, likewise, Otta, and thanks for texting us in, and a very good evening to you. Now, Audrey, so the Lord gave you the title, not the subtitle, but gave you the title. Okay, so tell me what happened after that before you start to get into research and all that. By the way, where did the subtitle come from?
The subtitle came about a few months before I published it in 2021. I just had a real strong sense that I needed a subtitle, and actually it was going to be a bit stronger than that. But yes, I was advised maybe just to kind of tone it down a little bit. More like, are we ready for a Holocaust? Not a potential one, but it's coming, you know. So that was, back just a few months before it was published in July 2021.
And Audrey, tell me about because you did an awful lot of research. I mean, you would have spent over a year altogether in Israel, and having been in Lebanon. Tell me about the research that was involved in bringing such clarity that you brought in that book.
Well, I mean, a huge amount of research went into it, to be honest. Like between articles, books. There's just so many statistics, you know. I was watching some YouTube clips, of course, but I suppose it was mostly from what I was reading. I spent nearly about 9 years researching, writing, updating, continuing my research, writing, and just bringing it together. And I didn't really know when, you know, it was going to kind of form into a piece that was ready to be produced, you know. But the day finally came. And as I say, just shortly before that, the subtitle, Are We Prepared for a Potential Holocaust?
And in relation to the Irish people, you obviously saw what the Lord was seeing in relation to Ireland going down a very different route, down with its attitude towards Israel, and you very much speak very publicly to the Irish people in the book, don't you?
Yes. Well, I mean, the Irish really are fairly oblivious and to the actual facts of the matter, of the issue, of the conflict. And it has been, I suppose, I know we're going to be probably talking about media at some stage, but there are many factors that contribute to the ignorance really of the Irish with regards to what is actually really happening in the land. And
why do you think Israel has become such a divisive issue in Irish politics?
You know, I know it's become a divisive issue in Irish politics, but really, actually, if you go back into history, if you go back to 1936, the 30s, the 40s, Irish politics were not favorable toward the Jewish people or Israel, what we would now call Israel today, or the Jewish people. They were not favorable. They were not, actually, they had an awful attitude. And I do give some examples of that in my book. And in it, actually, I'm referring to a book that an Irish lady, Ray Rivlin, wrote called Jewish Ireland. But like, for example, there, like in 1936, the Department of Justice stated, quote, concerning the number of alien Jews who become established in this country. Now, I better put on my glasses because just to make sure I get this right.
All right.
Who became established in this country. The Minister for External Affairs, that's what he would have been at the time, will not look with favor on any policy which might lead to an increase in that number. So by 1936, we were already deciding we're not going to open our doors. We're going to keep them shut. We're not going to be open to any Jewish immigrants. Now, they didn't talk about other immigrants, but like the Jews, okay? In 1938, when Germany's triumphant entry into Austria rendered 120,000 Austrian Jews stateless, the Irish government made entry into Ireland for holders of German or Austrian passports available only to applicants not of Jewish or partly Jewish origin. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. In the 1940s and 1946, a Jewish society in London bought Clonlinn Castle in County Westmeath to house 100 Jewish war orphans. And the Minister for Justice, Jerry Boland, TD, at the time, refused to admit Jewish children, war orphans from the Holocaust, on the grounds that, and let me quote, "It has always been the policy of the Minister for Justice to restrict the admission of Jewish aliens for the reason that any substantial increase in our Jewish population might give rise to an anti-Semitic problem." Well, I think our government and, the powers that be at the time already had a bit of an anti-Semitic problem by the looks of things to me. Luckily, the chief rabbi of Palestine intervened, and that's Rabbi Herzog, he persuaded Jerry Boland to let the Clonlinn Castle children enter Ireland, these Jewish orphans come in after the Holocaust, but it was limited only to 1 year. That's all they were allowed to stay. So, so our government and Irish politics, yes, I mean, we're taking a downturn. It's getting worse.
But Audrey, was it solely our politicians, or was it the Catholic Church?
Oh, yes. Well, the Catholic Church had something to say about it as well. Absolutely. I mean, you could go back to Father Cray and the boycott in Limerick back in, was it 1904? So there were issues there. And because as a result of the boycott, 5 families out of 31 Jewish families left Limerick, because they were so persecuted, because what he was coming out with from the pulpit was just so destructive and so anti-Semitic. And he was never properly actually punished or penalized for his treatment of the Jewish people. He was only sent on to another parish, as has been done on other occasions in the Catholic Church when issues arose with the clergy. So yes, there was an issue in the Catholic Church. And, if we were to talk about the Catholic Church, I don't know if you want to talk about that now.
You can talk whatever. This is an open conversation, Audrey. You can talk about that if you want to.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we're to go back in history to really how anti-Semitism took such a grip in the world, I'd have to shamefully say, even though I would have nothing to do with it, and some true genuine Christians would never have anything to do with this, who believe in the Jewish Messiah, but that it actually began with the early church fathers from 100 AD with Justin Martyr and many of the early church fathers throughout those early centuries. And they had a bit of a spirit, an anti-Semitic spirit, and it just came across in their language. And more increasingly, they spoke derogatory things about the Jewish people of Europe, wherever they were living at the time. And they had no basis for this. And these were supposed to be Christians who were supposed to love your enemies. Now, the Jews weren't even their enemies, because they were just trying to get on with life as normal and just, go about their business. But they were being targeted. And I know even the likes of Martin Luther, this isn't just even the Catholic Church, but like Martin Luther started off, and he was actually, he was favorable toward the Jews. He was friendly to them. He never spoke ill of them until he couldn't convert them to Christianity. Well, when he couldn't convert them to Christianity, then he decided to get a bee in his bonnet, and he started coming out with rhetoric that was, really vile, and that had an effect on the Holocaust. There's just,
Do you believe that? And do you believe that anti-Semitism goes right back to when the disciples were about?
Well, I suppose you had the Roman occupation, okay. But just to explain about the disciples, All the disciples of Jesus were Jewish. The whole Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, they're all Jewish writers writing about Jewish people. There was one exception. Now, okay, there's one exception. Luke. He wrote the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts. All the rest were Jewish writers. And then, of course, they were eventually, as we know, going out into the Asia Minor and, say modern day Turkey, and out into the extended world beyond Israel. And what God called Israel, actually, in the very first chapter of, which I always find is interesting, in the very first chapter of the book of Matthew, which is the very first page of the New Testament. Second page, I suppose, might fall onto the second page. But it shows the connection between the God of Abraham, and that Jesus descended from Abraham and David, and it shows all of his lineage, his Jewish lineage. But also on the next page, God specifically, after calling Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus out of Bethlehem and out of Israel, he called them to go to Egypt because they were, at risk of, Jesus being killed by Herod, but God called them back to Israel, it says. It says that they're at the very start of the New Testament. They were called back to, it doesn't say Palestine, it says Israel, which I just find really interesting, because in a lot of Bibles today, and this is very sad to say, but in a lot of Bibles, at the back, you'll have maps. You'll have the maps of the land of Israel, in ancient times, and then it'll come to the time of Jesus, and many of them will say Palestine in the time of Jesus. And it's completely erroneous, because it wasn't called Palestine in the time of Jesus.
Absolutely. So there's actually there's some tampering going on of the Christian scriptures. I use Christian scriptures because I'm a tour guide, of course, and I refer to them, especially with Christian groups. And there's no mention of Palestine in the various Bibles, the Christian scriptures that I have. So you're telling me that they actually now have incorporated the term Palestine as something coeval with Jesus's life. Yeah, is that correct?
Yes, and that has been actually in a lot of different versions of the Bible, or a few different versions of the Bible, for a long time.
Well, Marco, tell our viewers just where Palestine came from and what it referred to.
Right. Well, Palestine basically is a derivation of Philistine. The Philistines were one of the sea peoples, and we find their names. The name comes up also in Egyptian sources, because the Egyptians defeated the Philistines, who were originally from the area of the Aegean Sea. So they're basically a people who began in the Greek area, came to the Middle East, to a certain extent mixed with the local Canaanites, but they were a distinct non-Arab people, so we can't speak of them certainly as an Arab people. Now, Herodotus, of course, mentions them as well, but there's no notion of them being associated with what is understood today as Palestinian, which is, to be honest, a fictitious narrative. But to denote a geographically bound area, this happens under Hadrian. So we have the suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and at this point the Romans, they paid a huge price in suppressing two great Jewish revolts, the revolts that culminated in 70 of the Common Era and the one that culminated in 135. So at a certain point, Hadrian decides enough with the Jews, and he changes the reality on the ground in Jerusalem. He renames Jerusalem, and it becomes Aelia Capitolina, and he uses the term for Israel's arch enemies in the period of Saul, David, and King David, and he uses the name Palestine as a derivation of Philistine, and he applies it to an area which became known as Syria Palestina. Okay, but we have to bear in mind that this was a part of the Roman Empire. It was a province of the Roman Empire. Most of the people were either Greek or Latin speaking, with some Western Semitic people. That was the general lingua. Now, the Western Semitic people were not Arabs. The Arab period begins in 638. So the notion of Palestine, the word Palestine, did not denote an ethnic group as it has began to happen in the mid 1960s, when the notion of an ancient Palestinian people, which had never existed, was concocted essentially by combining, as we've mentioned before, the capacity for propaganda of the Soviet Union and its marriage with the doctrine of the Muslim Brotherhood. So that's in a nutshell.
Now, Audrey, I want to bring us right fast forward back to the present, and we're moving to a different segment here in relation to the media. And before we talk about the media and your book, what is your take on the media's coverage of events in Israel and events in the wider Middle East? What's your take on their coverage?
Well, there's no doubt that they're very biased. And there just seems to be a certain narrative that for some reason they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. The mainstream media, at least, you will find, thankfully, some media outlets that will actually want to find the true facts and the evidence. But bias really is what, it's like, to me, as if they're big into pantomime. And they want to have the goodie and they want to have the baddie. And they've decided who they've made to be the goodie and who's going to be the baddie. Who's going to be the abuser, who's going to be the abused. And so, this is what they're about. It's just incredible. And they hold a lot of power, a lot of power, because they're so influential. Because where do we get our news from? People turn on RTE, they turn on BBC News, and it's just, it's so misguiding, so misleading.
Do you think that there's a room or a need for an Irish version of GB News in Ireland?
I think you have it. You're doing it. Well done.
well, thanks for that. We're playing a small part, I can assure you, Audrey. But yeah. I wish I was GB News or the Irish version of GB News. It'd be absolutely brilliant. Yeah, bringing alternative stories to it. But I take the compliment. Yes. But then okay, so.
We could definitely do with that. Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it, because it's just so one-sided. People are not being given the opportunity to hear the truth.
So perhaps we should launch an appeal. We should take the opportunity here. If people are interested in such an endeavor, we can put our heads together and we can get it off the ground.
Absolutely. And just in relation to media coverage and various other coverage, you're right in saying. You're right in saying that that they're biased towards Israel, and what we're seeing in Ireland, and I'm sure it worries you as it worries me, Audrey, is the what you're looking at in the Dáil and Shannon. We're now looking at a completely nearly left-wing alliance, if you like, even though there might be an so-called opposition. But when it comes to Israel, it's very, very difficult. And we're going to talk about the reaction to your book momentarily in relation to this. But there is it's a very worrying development in Ireland that there is no balance in relation to, barred a couple of politicians, and some of them obviously quite rightly are afraid to put their head above the parapet. But it's very worrying that you have a media that is not independent when it comes to Israel and what's going on in the war in Gaza and all of that. And next thing, you're looking at the makeup of the Oireachtas. Does that concern you, Audrey? And remember, this is 5 years later than your book. We're looking at an explosion in Ireland in relation to anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, of course it does. And by the way, each of those government ministers, the top guys, the Taoiseach and, all of the top ones have my book. They have a copy. A copy of my book was placed in their pigeonholes. They have it. And there has been they haven't read it. They have clearly, and I asked them, knowing that they wouldn't have much time because they're very busy people, I understand that. But if they could only even read one chapter, I asked them to read chapter 6, which would just expose the PA and Mahmoud Abbas, for example, and other things, that Hamas, Hezbollah, and where these all come from, and really just how vile these terror organizations are, and it really gives history, the history of Mahmoud Abbas and like who he emulates as his hero, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, for example, Hajamin al-Husseini, who was the equivalent of Hitler. And he was actually a contemporary of Hitler and influenced Hitler, believe it or not, to kill the Jews. And there's evidence of this from the Nuremberg trials, SS officers actually coming out with this.
Yeah.
So yes, it is very worrying, because no matter what people seem to do, like there's nobody in the government, there's nobody in Parliament that's standing up. There used to be one person, a senator, actually a Kerry-man, that was trying to speak up in a more balanced way and a less biased, and was trying to see, trying to get, but he was absolutely shut down every time. It was really rude, how he was treated. And even the very fact that Dana Ehrlich, the former ambassador, Israeli ambassador to Ireland, she was actually pulled out because Israel could see just really how bad the situation had gotten with our government and in this nation. And she had tried her best. She was so gracious. I listened to a number of interviews of hers.
And I want to, and I'm going to name the senator because I want to really thank Senator Ned O'Sullivan for his devotion to the Jewish question in Ireland, and in trying to raise it as many times as possible as he could. And hats off to him. But Audrey, you're still with us there, are you?
Audrey's frozen. Her connection.
Oh no, she's back.
She's back.
You're
back.
back. No,
I frozen as well?
Yeah, no, we weren't. But did you hear what I said? Did you hear what I said?
No.
Okay, so I just said I'm going to name the senator. I said Senator Ned O'Sullivan. I want to thank him because he has been really an inspiration in relation to his time in raising the issue around Ireland's coverage of both from government and the media. So I want to say it, and I want to thank him for that. But Audrey, this brings me to your book, and in relation to the media and the treatment of you and the treatment in the Oireachtas, because if I remember rightly, the Oireachtas library wouldn't even hold your book. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. Yes, I sent in 5 free copies, just to give them the other perspective, for them to hopefully be open to it, and it was refused. That was refused.
And I think if I remember rightly at the time, the reason it was refused was because it wasn't from a normal publisher.
That was their official excuse anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That was their official excuse.
That was official excuse.
Which was a load of nonsense.
It was a load of nonsense, yeah.
But in relation to when you were launching your book, how did you feel about media interviews and stuff like that in relation to that? Were people open to that, or what?
I did have some interviews, and I got to get my book into a number of bookshops, mostly Christian, but a few secular. Yeah, I've had mixed experiences. So I've had some very good experiences, like with yourselves, and John Moriarty of Chalk Solace, great interview, just wanting to hear the truth, the facts. But there were some other ones that I had with RTE and TG Carr, where because of their biases, it was actually really difficult to bring much of what I wanted to share to the table, because they kept on shooting me down and blocking me from saying and giving facts about the nonsense they were talking about. They didn't have a clue about some of the things they were saying. Was just pure, it was pure nonsense. So the usual kind of narrative.
It's embarrassing. Yeah. It's embarrassingly bad, but nobody picks them up on it. This is the problem. Sorry, Eugene.
No. Go ahead, Marco. That's part of the conversation. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I just wanted to make that point. Yeah.
Where was I going with this? Just in relation to okay. So, do you see something in you putting that headline to with God's help to the book, and then your edition before it was published on it? So, hey Ireland, Israel's on the line. Are we prepared for potential Holocaust? What does that say to you? October the 7th came nearly two years after you wrote that book, and very much what I'm looking at in the headline here, and what I'm looking at in the subtitle, "Are we prepared for potential Holocaust?" I mean, that's not stuff that can't be just coincidence.
No, but really, if you were to look at how things were progressing in the Middle East over the previous years, we were coming to a very serious moment. There was no doubt about it. And there's unfortunately more to come, especially with the Iranian regime still being in power, So it just, to me, it made perfect sense because of what I was reading and what I was learning about, say, these terrorist leaders, for example, and their ideologies and their aspirations. And just to take like the Hamas charter, for example, like death to the Jew is all over it, kill the Jew, and it's based on the Quran. It's based on the Quran, actually, which is very worrying because Islam is growing in the world, and they're moving out into all parts of the world, including Ireland. It's interesting that you can't even mention, or at least I was watching one time on the news there, a guy in Sligo. So a gay man in Sligo was attacked by a Muslim, but they didn't actually specify that he was a Muslim on RTE News.
No.
That's what I thought was very interesting. Just, that he was attacked, and this same Muslim tried to kill. I can't remember all the details because I saw it very briefly. We actually don't have a television, so we saw it on the way up to in Barack Obama's on the screens, the news, and I couldn't believe that they didn't actually give the name. And I said, I bet you, and he was actually, because in the Middle East, as we know, gay people in called Palestine.
Well, what about gays for Palestine? What about gays for Palestine? Surely they'd be welcome in Gaza, would they not?
It's insanity. They'd be thrown off buildings. If they were in Iran, they'd be hanged from cranes. This is what they do. I've seen images, photographs, unfortunately. But this is what they actually do. It's so sad. It's so sick.
And tell me just a quick one. You don't use television in the house. Is there a particular reason for that?
There's just an awful lot of negative stuff on it, I think, a lot of negative news, a lot of, and so, and then
maybe you're afraid of paying the TV license. A little trip down memory lane. Do you remember those vans that used to come looking for the TV
They're still doing it. They're still doing it.
The sponges. Do you remember that? The vans.
No, there are some good things on the TV now, don't get me wrong, but there's just so much nowadays of I just don't.
I agree with you.
in my
That's why
mind.
I agree with you. That's why I asked you. But
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
can I ask you from a Christian point of view, Audrey, is when we're looking at what's happening right around the world, and we're looking at what happened in Gaza, we're looking at what's happening in Iran, is the devil about?
Is the devil about? By Gary, he is. He's alive and kicking.
Yeah, but
You know,
is he unleashed? Is he unleashed now in a different way than say some years ago?
I would think so, and it seems that you would believe so too. I've just from the very fact that you asked that question, Eugene.
I actually do. I actually do
Yeah,
believe it. I
yeah,
actually do believe it because
yes.
I cannot understand, and I've said this more times even on this program, I cannot understand how people no longer can see right from wrong, terrorism from peace. I can't understand how people can't see that. I mean, I was sending this link, the link for today's program, to some friends of mine on WhatsApp, and one of the friends come back to me and said to me on it, he said, "Is Israel good or bad?" Right, that was the question, and I wrote back, "Very good." So I mean, this is we here in Ireland are at a very, very, in a very dark space at the moment. You mentioned about the influx of Muslims from different countries, which is going to turn our country, because never have I seen as many of this. I'm going to refer them as to what Marco refers them as Palestinist flags, since there's no such thing as a Palestinian. Palestinist flags. I have never seen as many in a country at various things, various protests outside the Dáil and all around the country, and I've never seen it as negative in this country. How Israel, as a country that you went to and found that it couldn't possibly be an apartheid country, and I just feel that we're in a different space now. That and what's going on in Iran. Sometimes Donald Trump worries me. He does worry me because in order to remove that regime, there is no point in pussyfooting around with them and thinking that they're going to do a deal, because they don't do deals. We've had people on this program here who tell us exactly the way those Islam thinks, that they don't class themselves as equal to us.
Yes.
So therefore, they're not going to do a deal.
No.
Right. So now, I suppose the only thing that's given me heart, and I'd hate to see any US servicemen killed, but will that finally turn Trump to do what should have been done from the very beginning and remove the regime, which the good people of Iran have been looking for for so long? A number of people who have been friends of the Jewish people back in the past, and this regime, that concerns me. That's why I think that the devil is unleashed in the world, because there just seems to be no understanding what right and wrong is anymore.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They need the return of the Shah. Shah needs to return by the looks of things, you know. But will Trump actually finish the job? He might do. He might sort out, remove the regime, and maybe the Shah can then step right back in. And that would be wonderful. And there will be a season of peace then in the Middle East. And that actually would be biblical as well, that we would come into a season of peace, which I find quite interesting. Just from looking at strategically, just the mapping of Israel at the moment and the countries around, how Israel has it's been necessary for her to go in to Lebanon and to deal with the Hezbollah issue, to try and deal with it for once and for all. Now, they're not going to be able to fully deal with it for once and for all, or to fully deal with any of these terrorist entities, because there are millions of them. You know, when you add them all together, there are too many that are actually indoctrinated and that are willing to die, for what they believe in, and they don't care what kind of bloodbath they cause. So it's not possible, I don't think, to attain permanent peace, at least for a human being to do it. But there may be a season, I would think, maybe of peace in the region, as we were even beginning to see with the Abrahamic Accords, that we seem to be moving in that direction. And now Israel is trying to make that southern part of Lebanon, safer. So they're trying to push back up, way up beyond the Litani River, and the terrorist element that's there. They've been dealing with Gaza. They've been, but as for Iran, that's a big one to deal with, because you're talking about the biggest exporter of terror in the world. The biggest exporter of terror. They have their tentacles in Lebanon, in Hamas, in Gaza. And Hamas are not just in Gaza, by the way. There's an element of those also in Lebanon and in other countries. The Houthis of Yemen. So they're just they're really the big boys that need to be dealt with as much as possible. So they do need to take it seriously, America and Israel. But will it be done? Will they actually manage to topple the regime in Iran? Because it would be wonderful for the people. There are lovely Iranian people, as you say, that just want a normal life, that women that want to be able to get educated, go to college, go to university, that don't want to have to wear the hijabs or whatever they're called. They want to have the freedom to be more like the Western world, like Israel. They want a democracy like Israel,
Now, just before I go to Marco, because I want to come to you on this, Marco, in a moment, there's a couple of comments in just there. Otto says he must have been talking about when we talked about an alternative for GB News in Ireland. He's wondering, can we support the stream donating? Otto, you're very, very good thing. What the greatest support you can give us at the moment is just to subscribe, which I know you have, and to share this as often as you can, because but it's something we could look at down the road, as Marco said. But thanks for your message there, Otta. Now, also, wait till I bring up the next one here. Okay, next one here is big hugs, Maya and Marianne in Dublin. Love of Rahaza. And big hugs back to you as well, and thank you for joining in and commenting. And I hope you're enjoying what you're listening to and getting thing. And then Tom O'Donoghue has written in and said, watch Revelation TV for the truth about Israel. Well, now there you are. Brilliant. Watch Revelation TV about for the truth about Israel.
Yeah. So, I did an interview actually there with on the Middle East Report with Jackie Goodall of the Ireland-Israel Alliance.
Oh yes.
And it was wonderful. Yeah, he's great. The interviewer, I can't think of his name now offhand, but yeah.
Okay, so there's on Revelation TV if you want to know the truth about Israel. Thanks indeed for that, Tom. And then Otta just says, sends back, thank you, Faye, thank you, and we thank you as well, Otta. Now, Marco, just going back to you, just on that Iran thing. Okay, so I know you were, I know, and you were rightly very, very, very downbeat last week in relation to Trump losing his marbles, in relation to. How could anyone ask Israel to move out of Lebanon and out of Syria because they don't want you there? I think it's clear to anyone they don't want you there, but Israel has to be there. But do you think there's also a rumor that the Ayatollah, the new Ayatollah, is not actually in the country at all? And that there's disarray among the leadership in Iran. Do you think that we could see a toppling of that regime? Or do you see the fact that some US soldiers lost their lives, which is a tragedy, and may they rest in peace? Do you see things turning, that maybe they should be doing what you said they should be doing, and that's finishing the job?
I think it's certainly within the realms of possibility. With regard to President Trump, he has had to clash with reality. His notion of making deals was very much a fantasy in the sense that, and this is also his great shortcoming, he conceives of the world in making deals. It's as if the Allies during the Second World War could have cut a deal with Nazi Germany. That's something that doesn't work. It simply cannot work. The mental regime of the Iranians is such that they would rather die than lose faith, than lose face. That so they would press the self-destruct button and bring everybody else down with them. So in reality, the United States, the position of the United States at the moment is very strange. President Trump doesn't have a coherent picture of things. Let's be frank here. The current actions that the Americans have been carried out is because the Americans' hand has been forced at this stage. And you have to bear in mind that we have different strands and different views within the Trump administration. We have people who are very close to Qatar as well. And Qatar is very close to Turkey. And Turkey are the sponsors of the jihadists in Syria. And it's very unfortunate that the United States, and at an official level, hasn't realized that Qatar is a great threat to the United States. The United States is in great danger. The Qataris have been pouring billions into the
universities.
Into the universities and into the media and into social media. And this is a great source of the fraying of social cohesion in the United States. Now, they've been very capable, of course, it has to be admitted, because Qatar doesn't have an army, but it has huge economic power. And during the course of the decades, they have been investing in weakening the West for their great Islamist project. And one has to bear in mind that as I've mentioned before, the retrovirus of this project is Palestinism, whereby the immune system of European nations has been weakened. They've developed this notion of victimhood, okay, in the sense that they have been the sole actors in a very cruel world, perpetrating cruelty to the rest of the world. And they've developed a misplaced guilt complex. So there are a lot of things at play at the moment. But on the good side, we do see people who are waking up to the menace. They're beginning to join the dots, and they're beginning to see that Palestinism is the beachhead to fundamental Islam in Europe and in the West.
Okay. Just a couple of more comments in there. Where are we going first of all? Okay, so Pamela Mann, thank you, Pamela, for your message. Wonderful, insightful discussion. Thank you, Audrey, and the other speakers for your faithfulness. Really good to hear from you, Pamela, and we appreciate you subscribing and whatever. And if you can spread it around, that'd be brilliant. Thank you for commenting, and really appreciate your comments. And then Breed O'Sullivan, we are truly blessed as we listen. We are one with you all in spirit. Thank you, Audrey, for being a voice in Ireland for Israel. Shalom, Breed and Jerry O'Sullivan, Shalom and Slán. And that's clearly one aimed there directly at you, Audrey. They obviously like what you do, and we do as well. Now, I want to bring you back to your book, because I heard you mention earlier on that if there was one chapter that you would want our politicians to read, that would be chapter 6. Why?
Okay, so it really exposes, it's a massive expose on Fatah, which is supposed to be the moderate faction, of Palestinian politics. And it's not, by the way. So it really exposes that. It exposes Mahmoud Abbas, the president, so-called president self-declared president, really, and forever president, because he came into power in 2004, I think it was. And he is still in power. There have been no general elections. So you're talking about a very corrupt leader. It's a very repressive regime. He puts on the smile for the world, like Yasser Arafat eventually did at one point when he needed the funds, when his funds ran out from the KGB. So you've got all this exposure in there. It exposes their KGB links, actually, both Mahmoud Abbas and Yasser Arafat. And as I mentioned as well, Mahmoud Abbas, how he hailed to a crowd of thousands in Gaza of just, the population of Gaza. He hailed the Hajamin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who really was on par with Hitler and very influential during that time. And really, the Third Reich was, that 1,000-year reign would see, in his eyes and in the eyes of Hitler, the takeover of the Nazis by the Nazis of the Middle East, and that they would demolish the Jews there. He actually made a bit of a pact with Hitler that, okay, so they worked together, and that he would get the Muslim world to bow to Hitler, which we know that he was only going to do that for a while, because to him, Hitler is an infidel, So, but he was playing the game in order to achieve his own purposes, in order to eliminate, eradicate, obliterate the Jewish people. So there's just a huge expose there of the leaders of Hezbollah. And of course, Hassan Nasrallah was still the leader of Lebanon when I wrote this book. Israel has very successfully taken out many of those top Hezbollah leaders, which is absolutely wonderful. But yeah, so there's so much in that chapter. I just think, as I say, that's the one that I recommended to the politicians. If they were to read nothing else and they read only that, surely they'd have to face it. But it's like they're hoodwinked. It's like there's this veil. They're deceived. They just don't see. Like you're speaking there, Eugene, about us entering into a time of darkness that you really feel like is the devil. Is the devil really at play? Like, has he been unleashed? And like, this is a sign in these times, actually, the deception, that how easily people are being hoodwinked is a sign that, yes, the devil is very much at work. And, I'm
looking at Ireland, Audrey, since the unveiling of the abuse by the Catholic Church of children and so forth, and how they dealt with all of that. And I'm looking at that, and now I'm looking at a Europe which we're part of, a Europe that doesn't want to be religious anymore, have cast that off. Ireland has cast it off in the main from what was a Catholic country, has cast that off, and when I look at the book that you wrote to the Irish people, because you were speaking directly to the Irish people, that now is even more difficult now, because a vacuum has been created because of the lack of religion in the country now. A vacuum has been created, being filled, I suppose, by immigrants, and the other one is the obsession with climate change. I'm not saying there isn't climate change. I'm not suggesting for a minute, but there's an obsession there, and it's becoming nearly like a religion. Yeah. Is that how you see Ireland? I'm not saying you should see it the way I see it, but is that how you see Ireland right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going down the sinkhole, We really need to turn and really look up, and we need another kind of St. Patrick moment. We've reverted to, as I said earlier, what's like the pagan days, darkness, but we need we need a revival. We need God to do something, and we need to get our act together and stand on the side of truth.
And do you mind me asking? Do you mind me asking? I'm asking this in great seriousness now, and I'm not thinking. Is God saying anything to you right now in relation to what's going on here, or even around the world?
Well, what he's saying to me, what I get from the Lord has to line up with Scripture. If it doesn't line up with Scripture, well, then I'm, in error. But from my reading of the Scripture, the Scriptures, there will be, looking at even the Old Testament, looking into those Scriptures as well, but that there will be a revival and awakening in the body of Christ, and that many will come in, that there will be like, I suppose the doors, there'll be a narrow kind of, just a small opportunity and a short window of time for people to turn and realize that we're not God, that there's actually a God up there, and he's actually loving if we would give him a chance, but we need to be obedient to him, because if you love me, you will obey me. So I do believe that we're coming into very serious times, in one sense. But I also, when I look at the book of Acts and those scriptures, this is tying the New Testament with the Old Testament. But that revival will come, that, the former and the latter rain is going to come, according to the book of Joel and some other books in the Old Testament. And I think, it seems to, when you look into the New Testament as well, there seems to be that we're waiting for that same kind of last chance for people, to get their act together, to stand on the side of truth, to begin to pull off the deception.
Do you think Ireland? Do you think Ireland can? Do you think Ireland can come back from the brink?
I'm among probably a minority of believers in this country who believe that, yes, that there will be a revival of a kind, and that the true body of Christ will rise up, of Messiah, will rise up, and that body will be made up of, people like myself and yourself, of Arabs, of Jews, of people from all over the world. It won't be specific to any ethnic group, but that there will be believers, as there are all over the world, and others will join in, will come in, according to the scriptures, and whoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It's good news,
And Marco, from a Jewish point of view, there's a lot of people making Aliyah to Israel right now, because it's ironic that a country that's on a war on 7 fronts, and the people who are not in Israel, the Jews who are not in Israel, feel are unsafe outside of Israel. I mean, that's ironic in itself, is it not?
Indeed. You're quite correct. Look, for a Jew to live outside of the land of Israel is essentially to live in exile. That is, one really can't state it differently. It is exile. So to feel fulfilled, I say, as a Jew, you have to live in the land of Israel. When you live in another country, as great as those countries can be and as wonderful as they can be, something is missing. You're not in your own habitat. The land of Israel is fundamental to Judaism. It is central. The rhythms of the land, the Jubilee, when the land has to lay fallow, the temple, all these things are central to Jerusalem. The reconstitution of the Jewish state after 2,000 years, these are central elements to Judaism. And of course, the rebuilding of the temple is central to Judaism. So certainly, to live in the land of Israel is something very special. Of course, people do make Aliyah, as we say, for different reasons as well, because there are obviously some very significant dangers to Jewish life abroad. And I think these are only going to increase, to be perfectly frank. I don't see an improvement happening. I think that whether people come for religious or other reasons, for reasons of security, I think we're going to see a significant increase in the number of Jews wanting to make Aliyah to the land of Israel. Interestingly, despite the almost 3 years of war, the economy is doing very well. It has held up very well. The only aspect of the economy that hasn't held up is tourism, the sphere that I'm involved in. But anyway, I'm not the only one. But so things are looking up. If you come to Israel, you'll feel an energy and an optimism that you won't feel elsewhere. And I think people can learn from Israel, because the nation is a project. And I think for many years it was the case in Ireland. Ireland's, unfortunately, and I hope it can recover, and I think, Audrey, we believe it will recover sooner or later. It will find its way again, but it will require going back to basics and rediscovering the sources of Irish identity. Much as in Israel, the source of our identity are the scriptures, and Ireland too will have to look in that direction again to reacquire a sense of self.
Okay, I'm going to bring this to a close, but sorry, there's a comment in here. Just 1 second. Can't wait to visit Israel, Otta. Well done, Otta. It will be the journey of the life, I guess. And I can say amen to that, Otta, because that's what I would like to do. Is I think that would be the crowning of my life is to go to Israel. I think that would be the one thing I would like to do at some point. So, and Otta, thanks for your interaction with our webinar this evening, as usual. Now, I just want to say to people, before we go, I want to say to people, please look at this book. This book is written, as you've heard, is written by Audrey Griffin, who has no political axe to grind. This is written from the heart. It's written in layman's language. It's available. And Audrey, you can just read out your website there for us. I know I put it in the comments, but just tell us what it is again.
No problem. It's www.israelontheline.ie. That's israelontheline.ie.
There you go, folks. israelontheline.ie, or the alternative place to get it is on Amazon. But israelontheline.ie, because that is a brilliant read, folks. I guarantee you it is a brilliant read, and it's so easy to read. But and as I say, Audrey has no political axe to grind, so I would encourage you to buy. I think it's about €10, I think, which is the value you're getting for that. I get no commission on this whatsoever. So I'm just letting you know, it's because I believe the book should be read by everybody, so please do that. Okay, and before I go, all sorts of stuff coming in here now, and just take that down for a minute. Okay, take that down, and then there's 2 other messages before we go. Hang on a second now. Pamela Mann says amen, and amen to you as well, Pamela. Thank you indeed for that comment. And then Tom O'Donoghue is back, and Tom says, brilliant discussion and enlightening for Ireland. Isn't God calling all the Jews back to the land? That was my very point, Tom, with people making Aliyah, because that is what the Jews believe, that when God will eventually call them all back to the land of Israel. And that is very, very well said there. And then we have another one here as well. Sorry, they're all coming in there before end. Great discussion. Thank you so much there from Angela Ford as well. Thank you, Angela, for contributing there and listening and viewing. And we really appreciate your time and for interaction with us as well. Now, where am I going? Okay, so that brings us to the end of this evening's program. So, Audrey and Marco, I want to thank both of you so much for joining me. It's been really a riveting conversation, and very, very, so delighted to have both of you, and especially Audrey, you're the special guest. So, especially to you, thank you so much for joining me on the Green Zone. Now, whatever your conclusions our viewers reach, I hope tonight has encouraged everyone to explore history more deeply, questions, assumptions, and engage with a wider range of perspectives on one of the world's most complex and emotionally charged conflicts. Healthy democracies depend on informed discussion, respectful disagreement, and a willingness to examine evidence from more than one viewpoint. If you've enjoyed tonight's program, please subscribe to the channel, share this discussion with family and friends, and let us know your thoughts in the comments as well. Because when you subscribe to the program, it helps us to get even better content as time goes on for that. And so where am I going? Yeah, so join us again next Sunday at 7 p.m. Irish time for another edition of the Green Zone Updates from Jerusalem. Until then, thank you for watching, and a very, very good night to you, and take care. And we'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.